Howdy, kids. I'm using a different program to record this week. So if the sound is weird or I'm stumbling a little bit, it's because I don't use this program very often and I'm not super comfortable with it. This week and next week are the toughest 2 weeks in terms of we got to get through 4 chapters each week. And we do this, the carrot at the end of this is that the last week we only do 1 chapter, and it's really not a super challenging chapter. And that's because I'm assuming you're going to need extra time to get together your final versions of your paper and the presentations for you to share with your peers. But we'll get to that. I'll talk about it actually in week 5 to give you a little more time to think about it. So the 4 chapters this week here. Chapter 7, which also leads into chapters 8 and 9 a little bit, we're going to look at the idea of perfect competition. And as you read here, the 4 tenets of perfect competition are really important to understand. If you are working in a market with perfect competition, you will see that everybody is selling the exact same thing. And this is why, as you try to think of examples of perfect competition, it's really tough. We have some theoretical ones. We have some kind of sort of maybe ones. But as you well know, when you go to the store, you're going to see similar products, but not often identical products, which technically that makes that monopolistic competition, which isn't really something that's going to come up much. So perfect competition, you have identical goods, you have lots of buyers and sellers, which means no one is really too big to affect the market. And those buyers and sellers all have the information they need about it. If I know how to use a product and you don't, that would give me an advantage as the seller of the product. In perfect competition, everybody knows everything. And it's very easy if you want to get in or out of that market. So in the rest of that chapter, you're going to kind of work through learning more about those key ideas. Chapter 8, we're going to look at monopolies and why monopolies exist. In some cases, it is just natural monopolies where, if you are the only natural source of something, you're going to have a monopoly on it. Sometimes it's government regulated. For instance, if you are a pharmaceutical company and you invent a new drug, you have the exclusive rights to make it for 20 years, to give pharmaceutical companies the incentive to try and find new drugs. If they can't make any profit off it, they're not going to invest their time in doing it, and we wouldn't have found things that have changed people's lives. And so you're going to spend some time looking at monopolies, some of the reasons they exist. Sunk costs introduced as a huge idea, I think a life idea. Once you've spent money, stop thinking about it. People who have old cars, like myself, and spend $1,000 to fix up your car, and 6 months later it breaks, and it's another $500 to fix. And people say, "Oh, I just spent $1,000. I don't want to throw that away." An economist would tell you that is a sunk cost. You have already spent it. Don't make your next decision based on anything you did in the past because it's gone. There's nothing you can do about it. Chapter 9 then leads us into wages, how we have demand and supply of laborers, how wages are determined. You're going to start to get into the idea of marginal cost and marginal revenue. In an economic setting, think of marginal as always meaning one more. So marginal revenue is the revenue we can get from making one more. Marginal cost is the cost of producing one more. And you're going to look at some curves that marginal cost often will decrease at some point in production. And then eventually you can get to a point where it increases again. And that can help determine how many you should produce. And then chapter 10, we're going to look at poverty and why we have wealth inequality. Lorenz curves are introduced here. It's a big economic concept that basically the rich get richer and the poor stay poor is what the Lorenz curve reinforces. And we can look and see at how some reasons why the Lorenz curve is getting more bowed in the United States rather than less. And then touch on the idea of discrimination as well a bit in some ways, especially related to wages and incomes. Our 2 discussion board topics for this week. This is the first one is a question that you might have to wrestle with a little bit. And my encouragement to you is write your post and then read other people's. I want to give you the ability with this post to make some mistakes and come back and edit a little bit. Because a profit opportunity known to all will be realized by none is kind of a bizarre question. But you're going to work your way through it. You're going to be fine. Please make sure that you tie in accounting profit and economic profit into your discussion because they are 2 distinct things. And then the other question has to do with a drug Daraprim. And Martin Shkreli. I don't know if I'm actually pronouncing that right, but as you read about him, he was in the news quite a bit a few years ago and then a year or 2 ago for some negatives in his life. So you're going to read about that. It talks about monopolies and pharmaceuticals again. This one will be a little bit lighter read. My focus as I'm combing through will really be on the first one more than this one. And then your video assignment for this week is to look at minimum wage laws. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk of raising the minimum wage. The numbers that should be thrown out, lower income workers always throw out big numbers. And then the business owners say, well, here are the unintended consequences if you do that. And then my assignment for you is you come up with a minimum wage that you think would be good for our country and how we determine that. And even you can think about how would we adjust that in the future. There are a lot of good ideas as you research this that we shouldn't have to vote on minimum wages. Let's come up with a system where minimum wages are just automatically done, not unlike cost of living adjustments for people on Social Security. Excuse me. So that's the week coming ahead here. If it gets to a point, I don't know in your lives here, by the way, as we get into June, it starts to be vacation season. If you're going to be out of town or on the road, please let me know. We can probably work something out. Next week, I will be actually in DC most of the week. So can easily stay in touch with the class, but I understand how if you're going to be on the road or traveling and we need to maybe make an adjustment or 2, we can do that. So don't be afraid to let me know. And if you have questions on anything, if there's a concept, if there's a topic, I just don't quite understand this, please reach out. I love trying to put things in different words to help you understand. And so I'm more than willing to do that for you. All right. Have a great week.